All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA, and thanks for tuning in to the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So, what I want to call this podcast is, does school make us lazy pieces of shit? And maybe people will be offended again by what I say. I hope not. Let me get my bottle of water over here. But here we go. So, I'm just going to start off at the beginning of what I went through, I think, in my past and how I ended up thinking the way I think. So, my mother had me at a very young age. My father had me at a very young age, too. And they were really two hip parents. And my father was an ex-athlete. He was like a state champion ping pong. I think he won the title in boxing and the Golden Gloves when he was younger. He was an exceptional athlete in basketball. He went to a private military school, which was one of the, or maybe the most wealthiest military schools in the entire Midwest, or at least in Chicago. But I'm pretty sure it was the Midwest, Bishop Quarter. And my grandfather had a lot of money. He owned the largest tailor shop in Chicago. So my father had a really great education. The only thing was, later in his high school years, he ended up making a bomb and blowing up his fingers, which actually I think in turn saved his life because he was already in charge of a couple hundred people, from what I understand, being in military school and then getting ready to go to Vietnam. And a lot of his friends that went to Vietnam ended up being the first wave, if I'm not mistaken, that passed away. So my mother, let's jump on to her, very athletic, even at a young age, which was quite interesting. She was into yoga, swimming, and just really into fitness. And she liked sports, which was interesting because I didn't know many women back then that liked sports. And I only grew up really liking sports. I talk about this all the time. I really didn't grow up playing with toys. I think I had Evel Knievel and maybe the Bionic Man. Maybe. I think there was a couple things there. But most of my life was revolved around sports. And I don't know if you know this, my father and mother brought a nightclub when I was, I think, 2 years old. So my mother wasn't even old enough to actually be in a bar, let alone own one. And she was like one of the best doormen ever, according to my father. And my father was in his mid-20s when he brought this nightclub. And so basically I was programmed from 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, heading into kindergarten as a very active kid. Not only were both of my parents very active, not only with swimming and all these things, they loved snowmobiling. And then both sides of my family, they loved sports as well. Especially my father's side, they were really into boating. They all had boats. They all had beautiful cars. I used to call them the Italian Kennedys because we had summer homes. Not only that, they had homes or condos, I should say, in South Florida. I also had family in California. So, to make a long story short, it was very active. And also, I might as well just throw this in, a lot of my family members are huge into the arts, especially into music. So, my father was a professional drummer at one time, and a lot of my family members are into drumming, guitaring, singing, all these different types of things, let alone being involved with the world of fashion, because my grandfather owned the largest tailor shop in Chicago. So to say my life was very active, even at a young age, is really an understatement. But what I realized is, for one, I remember going to pre-K or something. There was, I don't know if it was pre-K back then, but it was swimming, more or less. It was, you took swimming and you went to school. I think it was called Cooper Kitty College or something in Illinois. I kind of remember that. My godmother was a swimming instructor, and like I said, a lot of my family members were boaters, water skiers, and even my stepmother, my step-aunt was the #1 water skier in the world, and they all trained out of where my father's nightclub was near, which is Wonder Lake, and Wonder Lake still has, I think, the best water ski team in the world. And a lot of them ended up going originally to Ohio to SeaWorld to start a ski team, and then went on to Orlando, Florida, and started the ski show there as well. If you've ever seen Jaws 3, my step-aunt's in there, but my stepmother was an exceptional skier, and a lot of my families, it was just a really known thing that they all water skied. And to make a long story short, I was very active. Then school started. So I remember after pre-K, because I thought it was swimming, and I was always on the go. My father was always throwing me the football, trying to show me how to box. my mother really started putting me in martial arts, I think, at a very young age, and then I ended up getting out of there. I just got bored with the routines, but I was like the only 5-year-old, I think, in the whole class. And this was when it was like in its infancy, karate, but my father was a huge Bruce Lee fan. And my father loved self-defense and fighting, and if you've been listening to my podcast, I really think parents should start teaching their children how to, defend themselves. Even I don't care what personality they have. I was just talking to my buddy who owns one of the biggest boxing gyms in Chicago, and we were talking about that today, that he's going to start incorporating for younger people, but they want to start incorporating, maybe teaming up, doing baseball and boxing, because a lot of kids in Chicago or in the Midwest love to play baseball, but a lot of them don't take jiu-jitsu or know how to fight or box. So he thought that may be something he may be teaming up doing, which I thought was a great idea, because we've been discussing that regarding kids really learning how to have self-defense, or at least protect themselves if something goes down. So now I'm going to throw myself into school real quick. Now, all of a sudden, I just remember going to kindergarten and being absolutely miserable. Let me get some water here. So can you imagine a kid who's basically involved with it? Like, I wasn't in the nightclub necessarily, but I was in and out of there during the days. Very active. Music, all these different things going on. Like I was saying, summers were all in Chicago. It was all boating, swimming, water skiing, and winters were, I wasn't into snow skiing. I was too little, but snowmobiling, just having fun doing that. And I didn't like fishing, but a lot of my family members fished and did all these things. On my mother's side, we used to play baseball a lot and things like that. I was also in and out of Cicero, which we used to play fast pitch against the wall. Not sure if you know what that is, unless you're maybe from New York or Chicago and stuff. You just basically throw a ball against a brick wall with a square. And so when I went to school, I just remember going to kindergarten. And this is right when my mother and father started to split, actually. So at the same time they're splitting, I'm kind of being stuck in this school. And all of a sudden I just realized, hey, they were like, you got to sit down. And I was like, what? How long do I got to sit down for? And they're like, oh, you got to sit down for this. And then as time went on, I just became more and more uncomfortable, because I went from being very active, and I guess I just had a lot of energy when I was younger, to all of a sudden them forcing me to shut down. And I'm not saying schools, just so we get this clear, I think education is amazing. And our school systems, our teachers, what they do, that's what they do. God bless them. If not for them, a lot of people obviously wouldn't be where they're at. And they put a lot of hard work into it. And I know a lot of them don't get as much pay as maybe they deserve. They may not get as much respect as they deserve. That's ridiculous, because teachers are amazing at what they do. But I do think, though, when it came to school, and still to this day, I think they take a lot of kids like myself, kind of hyperactive, and put them in a position, I'm not saying it's prison, but all of a sudden you lock us down and you say, okay, for the next 6-7 hours, you have to sit here. Now, I know we have recess, which was actually relatively short, and in Chicago, it was mainly indoors, bullshitty things. It could be 15 minutes or a little more. Then you had lunch, which could be a half an hour to an hour, and maybe PE, depends. But for a majority of that day, when you're the most hyperactive or you have energy and you want to do things, you're constantly being told to sit. And just literally sit there and listen to someone talk on and on and on, or read on and on and on, or work on, I don't care what it is, constantly. And I love, now that I'm older, all I do is things in that nature, which is writing, creating podcasts, creating programs, making videos, doing all these different things. And I get it, but I'm a lot older. So I've definitely lost a lot of that energy, but I still need activity and action throughout my day. That's even my job now. I travel all over the country. Today I had to fly into Jersey. Tomorrow I have to do something very early in the morning. At night I have to do something. Then I'm flying back to Florida the next day. I may be an extremist as far as that goes, but I do think a lot of people, what hurts them in their life sometimes, or somebody who's not a good student like I wasn't, it wasn't that I think I could have been a much better student, but I was so aggravated that I felt, and I may be wrong, but I think a lot of kids feel that they're being kind of stripped of their freedom, which I know that sounds crazy as a kid, but all of a sudden you're conforming us into something for so many hours that we just are getting bored. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And I also think me being around a lot of adults at a young age, even being involved with my parents, even divorce, or a lot of my family members were in business or doing different things. Some were modeling, some were in music, some were even in acting, some were doing hairstyling. Some of my family members were gambling. So it was again active. Then all of a sudden I have to go to this place 5 days a week minimum and just shut down. And I just felt like it was, I'm not saying it turns you into a lazy piece of shit. That's kind of I wanted to just get your attention. But I do think after a while we're starting to see obesity, or we start to see a lot of these things with kids not being active. Well, if we start them at, say, pre-K, where you're sitting, even if it's 3 hours, 4 or 5, whatever the case may be, and then eventually you go full-time school, and not only are you doing school, then when you're supposed to go home, now you're supposed to sit down and do homework, right? Then you're supposed to sit down and do dinner with your family, right? I get that too. And a lot of times your parents are exhausted at night telling you to shut up, go sit down, go relax. If you're not doing a sport, a lot of times you sit all day to get home to sit all day. What is that? And then you're going to bed, right? It's really kind of a situation, I believe, where it's just too much sitting. And I understand there's a point of mental where you need to learn things. But I think the future, and I'm not just saying this, I think we're seeing it more and more and more. And it's just like the workplace. You don't have to sit or be in one office or do one thing, unless maybe it's manufacturing and things. Obviously, that's different. If you have that type of job where, you're building cars or something in that nature. But a lot of people just sometimes sitting, being confined into a cubicle or at a desk. How much work are they getting really done? I think especially now more than ever with computers and everything, they're not getting nearly as much done because they're preoccupied doing different things mentally. They could even be looking at videos. It could be looking for other jobs. I don't know what it is. But again, it's society in general, I think, is just programming us to sit more and more and more and become more stagnant. And that's one of the reasons I believe obesity is the way it is. And back to programming, if we're constantly being programmed, I think, as young people to sit and behave, and that's what I kept hearing, or you keep hearing, no, 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 don't do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. I remember even sitting in class, I think at third grade I had a breakdown, I was crying. But I started to have I started to not feel good at all. So I ended up having to have my tonsils out, so I missed a lot of school. I think that was third grade. I started to have all these earaches, and my throat was always sore, and then my throat turned black, and I couldn't breathe. So they did like an emergency tonsil removal. My mother had it done, which that's not a lot of people had that done. Changed my life. Thank God for that. The earaches went away, sore throats. Then I ended up having a hernia after that, and so I had to have surgery again. I don't know if that was 4th or 5th grade. I'm trying to remember this. But I don't know if it was from sitting all day, but I also just did not feel good. I felt great when I was playing sports and active, but in school, I just sat there and it would just drain me. And I just felt like it would just exhaust me because I was almost fighting my, intuition to do something. And I don't know how to explain this to that point, but it made me feel sick and nauseated a lot of times. And I used to have these bad rashes, my knees, and even throughout high school. And I don't know if this was lack of nutrition from wrestling, but I also played other sports, soccer. I played football when I was younger. I played tons of sports. I don't think I was necessarily maybe getting the proper amount of sleep because when I was younger, I kind of was programmed to kind of be a night person. And no matter what, I couldn't fall asleep between midnight and 1 in the morning, and then you're getting up for school between 7 and 8. I don't think I was getting the proper amount of sleep. Eating-wise, my mother was an amazing cook, and I ate a lot of Italian food, but when I wrestled, I kind of had to cut weight. But after I got out of high school, I'll tell you the truth, I felt like I literally personally broke out of a prison. I moved to Florida, and for one, I think the sun, just being around the sun for the most part, I say Florida gives you 300 good days, 65 bad, where if you live in Chicago, I really believe you get 65 good, 300 bad. I also say if you live in Chicago, it's like living in a black and white movie, where if you live in a place like California, Florida, Hawaii, or something like that, it's a color movie. It's like just brings you alive. There's no excuses not to get anything accomplished that you want to accomplish. What are you going to say? It rained today? It's not like Chicago where it's, average temperature maybe throughout the year, I don't know, 50, maybe less. You have ice storms, freezing rain, snowstorms, wind chill. In the 70s and 80s, it was brutal. Let me get some more water here. When I moved to Florida, nothing could hold me back unless there's a hurricane. And those are really far and few between, maybe more now than then. But if it rained out, who gives a shit? No excuse for me not to go anywhere or do anything I really wanted to do. Don't get me wrong, there's not mountains here in Florida where I could go snow skiing. But I remember living in San Diego when I was there. Literally, I used to tell people that I had all excuses. I'm like, there is no excuse to do whatever you want to do almost year round. Even snow ski, practically, you can snow ski even in California, obviously, at certain times of the year. If you want to go really deep, you might be able to, snow ski whenever you want. I don't know. I'm not that much of a snow skier or snowboarder. But in California, it doesn't rain. For the most part, Southern Cal, I should say. You could go hiking. You could fish. You could mountain bike. You can run. You could cycle. Go surf. You can do it all. And Florida is pretty damn close to that. And I think when I went to Florida, it was like I just started to grow where I really graduated high school at 138 pounds. I don't know if you ever heard that story. And I was only like 5'6". In like less than a year, I was 220 pounds, I think, roughly. And I grew 4 inches. Not only that, my strength, and I think one of the reasons is I was sleeping more. I was working with my father, and he's not an early bird either. We were working in the vending business, so we would go to these bars, but a lot of them didn't open up till later in the morning, I guess you could say, or early in the afternoon. So we got to sleep in more. But we also stayed up late doing service calls and doing other things as well. But I got to sleep in. I finally had some financial, I had more money to eat whatever I want, whenever I wanted, which was a huge, huge thing. Because I remember even when I was wrestling and I got offered some mini scholarships, or people were talking about going to college and maybe wrestling, and then they were talking about like staying at 138 pounds, 145. I remember looking at them literally and saying, are you out of your mind? I want to be a man. I want to be bigger, stronger, taller, faster. I don't want to be 138 pounds nothing against 138 pounds, but I didn't want to be that. And I think all these things, again, when you're kind of being programmed a certain way, even in high school regarding certain sports you're playing, people are telling you what you should be doing. You really need to figure out in your inner self what you really should be or what you want to be. Really, and that includes going to college. If I didn't want to go to college, I used to visit my buddies' brothers' colleges and my cousins' colleges, and I used to even go to spring breaks. Even at a young age, I was going to spring breaks at like 12, 13 years old in Fort Lauderdale with my cousins, which is crazy, let alone my spring breaks. I didn't like the college atmosphere. I'd go to frat parties even. My buddies were in frats. Even when I'd come in and visit them, my closest friends, still to this day, a couple of them own law firms. A lot of them went on to be very prosperous, went to law school. I was the only one who didn't go to college. I went to a junior college when I got to Florida right out of high school. I went to 2 classes a week. One was for computer and business. I literally went there, and I think I only had to sit in there for 2 hours per class. I don't even know how to explain how miserable I was as a human being when I was going there. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. 2 things happened. One is I heard they had dollar movie night on one of my college nights. Once I heard that, I never went to that class again. I never even thought about it. It wasn't like even on my radar. The other one was, what was the second thing that happened? There was dollar movie night. I basically, the gym, it started to conflict with my workouts. And I was in college constantly thinking about working out. And then when I was working out, I just didn't even want to think about college because it almost upset me. And my stepmother once caught me walking. She kept catching me walking out my gym bag. And I used to belong to a couple gyms, but one was a world gym. And she actually caught me twice. And one was she saw me carrying my bag out or going in and out of the gym. And then another time she saw me pick up a girl. I had a Grand National with T-tops, so I couldn't lie. And she caught me one time just hauling ass, I think, down a road. And I was supposed to be in college. And then she confronted me, and I said, I know you promised my mother that you'd look after me now that I'm living in Florida. But I'm never fucking going to college again. I don't want to ever see a university. This was me back then. I never really got along with my teachers in high school. The brothers, the deacons, the priests. That's a whole different situation. I'm just not down with that crowd. But I really, at that time, never really respected teachers. I thought they were talkers and not doers. And I wanted to be a doer. And I also really felt that I was learning from people that I had no interest in learning from. Nor did I have anything in common with them, because back to them, I looked at that and somebody who went to school, then went to college, now they're back sitting on their ass for 6-7 hours a day. Don't get me wrong, some of them were coaches, which was interesting because a lot of them were men. In my high school that were around men all day, and then for some reason now they're coaching men all night, and then they would all go live with each other, which was men again, which I wasn't down with that either. So that's another personal thing. Thank God I went to a school that had a girls' school across the way, or else I wouldn't have lasted there either, because I had to see some type of woman or women. That's just who I am. But again, if you have kids, really, I really try to talk to my daughters when they were younger, and especially my younger daughter now, regarding school. She loves school. She used to hate school for a long time. And I always understood that, and I discussed things with her. I knew what she kind of was going through because we have a lot of the same similarities. But what was quite interesting is now that she's in college, she loves it because she's doing things she likes to do. And I think she also has the freedom, even though it's full-time school, it's not like high school. She, I think, like myself, dreaded getting up in the morning. And I think that's what a lot of people go through in school a lot of times, or even your workplace or whatever, is if you can't look forward to the things you're doing the next day, it is a damn anchor, right? And you're dragging that anchor. And some parents got to understand school isn't for everyone. And you're seeing this again, and I talked about this before, about these parents trying to force their kids to go in certain universities because they want their child to have this identity or this degree, or they want them to be a form of who they are, because if they went to college, they want them to maybe go to the college they went to, or they just can't handle having a kid that, doesn't go to college. Whatever their beef is, man, you got to listen to your kids, right? That doesn't mean that you're going to let them go be lazy pieces of shit. I'm not saying that by any means. They got to figure out what they got to do, and you got to kick them in the ass to do it. But again, if maybe sitting in school again for long periods of time may not be for them right now. Maybe it is. I'm not, that's between you guys. But I can only speak for what I went through, and I used to talk about this, and everybody used to think I was crazy. They thought, like, you're just lazy, you just hate going to school. Because I literally was talking about dropping out of school. I'm not kidding. I was having some issues in junior high. And, I remember a couple times I got sent to the principal's. I was literally walking out the door to leave, and I think one of the teachers grabbed me outside. And my mother, I don't think she knew what to do with me at that point in time. So that's why they decided to send me to a private Catholic school, more for discipline than it was, I think, education. Because the school that I would have went to, two things happened. We lived in a preppy area in LaGrange, which was a great high school, huge. It's called Lyon Township. It's a monster, that school. But we were moving to Melrose Park, which is an Italian area, which would have been Proviso East, which is a majority. Not very good. It's like 90-something% gang related, right outside Chicago. So my mother didn't want me to obviously go there. But I was really thinking at 8th, my mother says it now, if she didn't send me to high school, maybe, my Catholic high school, she was going to lose me to the streets, 100%. I almost became a person who was going to retaliate to prove my point. And that's all I kept thinking about was, one is when I was in high schools, I am wasting fucking time, man. Like, I need to make bread. You're preventing me from making money by sitting here. And my father just sold his club when I was like 12 or 13. So now I'm in high school. I have no job. My father started the vending business in Florida right around then. He really wasn't established yet. It was just like he's semi-retired in his early 40s. And I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to run a nightclub. And then all of a sudden I'm a fresh-fitted sophomore. He sells the club. I'm literally thinking, am I going to California or Florida? Because I hated the weather so much in Chicago. That was another thing that was making me nuts. I hated the weather, and now I didn't know what to do. So when I was in high school, I'm thinking I'm going to either become a pro athlete, but I never grew to the size that I was pretty decent at sports. And if they would have had MMA, that would have been a perfect fit for me because I was a pretty good wrestler. I wasn't as good at boxing, but I could have learned really well. But I was extremely strong for my size, and I mean extremely strong. And I was just insane. I didn't care about catching a beating or any of that stuff. I was pretty fearless then. I had no fear of what size you were, or I just had no fear. But I was really in a position in high school where I felt like I had nothing to lose. And I was very popular in high school as far as like the only reason I went to high school is for sports and for popularity, especially being across from a girls' school. I became very known there, and I don't know how it worked out for me. I don't know if it was because I worked out or my looks, my personality, but that was a blast. I kind of loved high school from the social aspect of it, despised it from the tactics of, like I said, sitting there from basically 8 in the morning to 2:30. And a lot of times I'd get in trouble or something, and I'd have to do detention, or I'd have to stay longer, whatever the case may be. And, practice is only 2 hours. I'm thinking I'm sitting in these classrooms for 6.5 hours, and I only get to practice for 2 hours. And then after practice, whatever sports I was, I'd run to the gym and just hang out there and lift weights all night if I could, or at my house. And, what was I going to say regarding that? I'll wrap this up soon for you guys. But yeah, throughout high school, I was very lost because I always dreamt of making movies, and I wanted to make a movie. I had no idea how to go about it. It was almost like a fantasy. I just said, hey, do I just move to California after this? And then as time went on, I ended up working for the Village of Melrose Park, and all these Italians, which I liked, but I knew I was getting out. And I was really honestly debating. I did this thing on Florida or California. I was weighing it out. And I would visit my dad in Florida, Orlando, and do summer school. That was another thing. I went to summer school in Florida. Got thrown out, I think, 2 or 3 times. I called a lady a hillbilly. These teachers had these southern draws. I didn't understand them. The kids there, like I was kind of dressed up. I was used to a kind of a more private-orientated education. But this place was it's called Oak Ridge, which actually a lot of famous people came out of this high school in Orlando, Florida, believe it or not, are well-known, established people. And a lot of them are friends. So I was doing summer school, because I wasn't too good in regular school, but I was doing summer school in Florida, and they would stick us in these rooms literally from, I think, 8 in the morning till 4 in one room to learn, like, say, history, hypothetically. You'd sit there all day for, like, 8 weeks or 10 weeks. It was fucking ridiculous. So that didn't work out very well with me. So to make a long story short, I loved Florida. I'd cry when I went back to Chicago. But the only thing I didn't like about Florida is I really didn't know what to do with my dad because his business was smaller. He was semi-retired, kind of feeling things out. My father just had another child, another girl. Not another girl. He had a daughter. So it's kind of like I didn't know where I was going. But I knew when I was in high school that I did not want to go to college, and I just was lost. And again, I'm not blaming school for any of this, just so you know. But I really believe if school or education really started to look at the future a little bit, or really, it's not, the systems are kind of outdated, I believe, especially with the way we kind of take kids and make them sit in these classrooms for long periods of time, bouncing from classroom to classroom, sit, then go home, study. Again, that's not bad. I don't know. It works for some, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't work for a lot of others. And I think if we start structuring at least high school, and I think my school didn't, mine was strictly a business-orientated school, college prep style school, and I had no intention of going to college. And then even the courses they had a film class, and all you did was study this book on film, like the history of film. Like, no, I want to go to film class. And I think things are much better as far as computers or maybe having different opportunities depending on what school you're at. But a lot of kids, I think, in high school start realizing who they are and what they want to do. And if we could just start gravitating towards that at a young age, not waiting till they get out of high school sometimes, because I think a lot of students that drop out of school or don't get good grades at school or just get by, I think it'd be a lot different, is what I should say. So, yeah, that's just my opinion regarding that. And definitely pay attention to your kids or your nephews, your nieces. Hold on, let me grab some more water and I'll wrap this up. Because, a lot of things that we learn, we're not learning from our teachers. We're learning from our closest family members, our friends' parents, all these other people. That's where I think we learn to become who we really are. Don't get me wrong, teachers teach you, but it's kind of, I'm not saying it's phony. Some teachers were great. I had good teachers and stuff. But once you kind of leave that classroom or you leave that grade, it's kind of gone. The ones that really have the biggest effect on your life, or at least the ones that you want to, the ones you gravitate to a lot of times, are, like I just said, they're not teachers necessarily all the time. It's family members or it could be even siblings or whatever the case may be. And if you're older, take care of your younger people, your brothers, sisters, all that shit, because don't ignore them. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you get a chance, check out my YouTube channel. Lately, I've been putting a lot of things related to different gyms I'm visiting all over North America, mainly LA Fitness, but I've been doing some in Canada, Good Life Fitness. I'll do Lifetime Fitness. I'll do World Gym, Gold Gym. And I'm also putting things up there regarding my Mastering Self-Confidence program, which helps men with their self-confidence. And if you want to check that out, it's masteringselfconfidence.com. I'm also on, besides this podcast, we're on YouTube. I think I might have just said that. It's just my name, Rich CELENZA. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So I'm on there as well. So yeah, that's really about it. What else do I got? That's it. All right. If you're traveling, safe travels, and I wish you nothing but the best.